started about 6 months ago. No, maybe even 7. Yeah, 7 months ago. When we moved into the new house.
The Jamesons had been living at Rottendale House for, I believe, a week or so when they phoned me up. They sounded very worried. I remember Karen saying she'd never seen Jessica behave like this.
Jessica had always been a good girl ever since she was born, just like any other 7-year-old girl. Happy, carefree, cheeky at times, but overall a very well-mannered little girl. Well, it had been a couple of days since we'd moved and suddenly she changed. She started acting strangely. I knew something wasn't right. She was being very quiet, not like her at all.
Jessica would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming and dripping with sweat. She said she'd had a bad dream, but wouldn't tell us what it was about. She had the same nightmare every night for a week, and what was really strange was that she always woke up at 3:30. Always 3:30, every night. As time passed, things got worse.
It was awful. She'd stopped eating, her teachers were worried about her schoolwork, and she barely said a word at home.
So I didn't know who to turn to. That's when Karen, being raised a strong Christian, suggested we call Reverend Peters, local vicar and dear friend.
When Reverend Peters mentioned the possibility of possession, it scared me to the point where I felt physically sick. I was scared to tears. Surely Jessica wasn't possessed.
Jessica was displaying typical symptoms of demonic possession: nightmares, introversion, sinister thoughts. But seeing as these hadn't manifested themselves as violent outbursts, there wasn't a little I could do.
Jessica's behaviour escalated to the point where she was lashing out, kicking walls, punching doors. But the strangest and the scariest thing was, one day we found unexplained scratches all over her back. We knew then that it was something supernatural. We knew it was serious.
The final straw came after about 2 weeks. It was something I'll never forget. The image will haunt me for the rest of my days.
I got another call from Mr. and Mrs. Jameson, saying that the situation had got worse, that Jessica's tendencies had become violent, dangerously violent. Karen told me how she walked in on Jessica, holding a dinner knife and approaching her brother, Sebastian.
When Reverend Peters suggested an exorcism, I thought he was joking. I mean, I didn't realise people actually did those things.
But as I trusted Reverend Peters to do what he thought was best, besides, what other choice did we have?
The day of the exorcism came. It was a Thursday. I remember distinctly because Reverend Peters arrived at ours after his morning sermon. He sat us down, told us the order of the ceremony, and that, should she get too violent, it would be necessary to tie her down.
He assumed that the new house had been the trigger for her demonic possession and insisted on blessing our house to prevent any further occurrences.
Initially, it went without disruption. Karen calmed and settled Jessica in her bed, and I began proceedings by saying the Latin prayers of St. John. It was only when I appointed the crucifix with holy water that we started to provoke the dark spirit within her.
When Jessica started to become violent and angry, Karen and I were instructed to bind Jessica's hands to the bedposts to avoid her harming anyone, or even herself. Her screams and shouts were almost unbearable.
Finally, after Reverend Peters had said the final prayer and anointed her forehead with holy water, she suddenly went limp, as if she'd passed out, and all went silent.
As soon as he gave the signal, Karen and I went over to Jessica. He said she was cured, that the demonic spirit had been expelled. She was free from possession.
I couldn't believe it, how she just changed, just like that. We thanked Reverend Peters and he left. He told us to keep an eye on her and call about him tomorrow about her recovery.
After the exorcism, Jessica seemed to be completely normal. She was sleeping and eating, her schoolwork was better, everything was fine. Up until this day, Jessica's been fine. She's the same happy-go-lucky girl she ever was. It was such a relief.
Exorcism really was a lifesaver. I don't know what we would have done without it. And now we've got the house blessed and we can sleep sound and know that nothing will happen to Jessica. She's safe from any evil spirits. We're just one big happy family again with 2 beautiful, healthy children. And that's the way it will stay. I hope.